So moving on to additional terms, I want to consider how surveillance interacts with a concept called life casting. To get there, though, I want to start with looking at an 18th century concept called the panopticon, which was actually a design for a prison. The design was set up, it was created by Jeremy Bentham. The panopticon is built around the idea that the watchers sit in the middle of it and can look into any of the prison cells at any point in time, but their observation is not necessarily seen by the prisoners. The idea behind this is that it creates the sense of constant watching, and the point is that, as Bentham said, that it's a new mode of obtaining power of mind over mind, and in the quantity that hitherto has not been seen any example. The point is that it's a form of mind control, so to speak, or control over the prisoners through observation. And when you look at the layout of surveillance cameras in, say, a place like New York City, you'll notice that they're everywhere. And this map is from about 5 years ago, actually. You'll notice that there are very few places that you can actually walk without being in the full view of a surveillance camera. Now, many of the surveillance cameras are on traffic lights, they're in individual buildings, but many of them are also private. So the big question is then, who is watching you? Who is paying attention to these surveillance cameras? Now, when we see the layout around the World Trade Center, or what was the World Trade Center, we see that there's no real clear path to move through here. The idea is not that if you necessarily have something to hide, so you want to avoid surveillance cameras, but we do things in our everyday life that are part of our personalities and the way that we live that we don't necessarily want everyone to see. You don't want to see somebody kissing your spouse goodbye. You don't want to see every meeting with every friend or every acquaintance that you've had. You don't want to see the moment where you're not really being your best replayed over and over again. And the point about being in a surveillance society is that at this point, the cameras are on you 24/7. Who is watching it, and where does this footage end up going? So the response to this is something called sousveillance. And sousveillance is a form of reverse surveillance, where the individuals then, in order to sort of protect their own quality of context, as it were, operate their own cameras and record their own path through the world. Sousveillance was originated by an artist by the name of Steve Mann, who was also the world's first cyborg. And you can see in this slide the transition of his equipment over the last 30 years, where originally to broadcast he needed large antennas, he needed a large monitor and camera and a giant battery pack. But even as late as 10 years later, it had sort of gone to the size of just a pair of sunglasses, an oversized pair of sunglasses. This brings us to the idea of when you see something on that appears to be surveillance, or something that appears to be someone putting themselves in front of the camera, is it real? Lonely Girl 15 was a project from 2006 that was set up to look like somebody broadcasting into their webcam, but it was actually scripted. And when it finally ended in 2008, it was part of this rich sort of landscape of fiction. Finally, I want to talk about an idea of sort of personal surveillance through video cameras, and that's along the lines of Justin TV or Ustream. But there's a side effect to this, in that when you put things online and on film constantly, you also open it up to sort of the ugliness or the dark side. And in 2008, a young man killed himself on Justin TV with a live audience. And part of the problem with what happened here was that the viewers didn't understand necessarily that they were watching something that wasn't made up.